I'm here today with Katy Murray, who is a leadership development coach, diversity and inclusion consultant, facilitator and speaker. She's coached thousands of leaders over 25 years and hosted workshops and conferences in 35 countries across the world. She is the director of Catalyst Collective, equipping organisations to co-create more equitable and actively anti-racist workplaces. And she was recently named one of the UK's top 50 D&I leaders by Hive Learning. And her new book, which if you are watching this, you will see just behind her. Do the thing, Katy. There you go. Her new book is called Changemakers, A Women's Guide to Stepping Up Without Burning Out at Work. So first of all, welcome. It's wonderful to see you.
You too. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Really lovely to have you here. And this is one of those books where I was kind of in on the genesis of the whole thing.
You absolutely were. You absolutely were.
It's so good to see it. So just, give us a little bit of a kind of potted history of the journey of the book.
Sure. So I remember doing your proposal book challenge. I think it was right at the beginning when we didn't really know what the pandemic even was, but I think
it was May
April.
2020.
Yeah, that's right.
April. No, you're right. April 2020.
Being in the garden, it was really hot and we were just outside on lockdown in that really strange early few weeks where everybody was a little bit uncertain about what was to come. And I remember spending those 2 weeks with you and loving the structure of every day put together part of the proposal, and at the end of 2 weeks having the proposal together. And so that was awesome. And then loving that I managed to get all these ideas kind of wrestled into some sort of structure and order, and then sort of parked it for a while, looked into, what do I do next with that? And then lots of other things were going on, as you know, in the world at that time, and got kind of sucked into that other stuff. So it was a year later when I was approached by my publisher to, do I have any ideas? And I was able to say, I do.
Funny you say that.
And that then became the start point of a conversation with them, which was, again, just great that I had that bubbled away, but also coded in some form that meant that another person could look at it and get into the ideas and we could work it up together. So it went from there. And then I had about a 5-month deadline to write the book. So that felt pretty quick. And then it was a year from sort of commissioning through to publication. I thought that once it was submitted, there would be nothing to do really in the next few months. But of course, as you know, that was also busy. So I feel like the year was really full with the book. And full since with the book, because then you do all of the promotion and the marketing. So yeah, it's been a big part of my life for the last couple of years.
It's funny. It's like when you, and who resonate with this, but when you're pregnant and all you can think about is the birth, and then the birth is over and you think, right, job done.
I'm done now. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's all I need to do. It's like, oh, actually now there's this whole thing.
The whole, yes. Yeah, exactly. So I want to come back to the process, and particularly the shaping of the ideas in the proposal challenge, but also, just what you discovered during the course of the writing and publishing and so on. And it's really fascinating for people. But before we do that, I want to take a step back and tell us what prompted the book in a sense, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
Yeah, so I've coached many leaders over many years, and I've noticed the levels of burnout for people that are highly ambitious, highly purpose-driven. We know now there's loads of data about the impact of the pandemic on levels of burnout and overwhelm, and it's really high, perhaps unsurprisingly. And so I wanted to write a book that brought that resilience and well-being piece right into the center for leaders. And then I also wanted to speak to this sense I was noticing with my coaching clients of, there's all this social change happening in the world. There's such a sense of we want things to be different around us, and we're kind of unhappy and unsettled by so much of what's going on around us. What can I actually do about it? And I'm hearing that from my clients, like, what is it that I can do to make a contribution, whether that's in terms of racial justice or climate change or any of the big issues that can feel really, really big, but how do I actually, in my own small way, make a difference? So I wanted to bring that resilience and well-being piece together with that sense of how do I discover my change-making contribution, and how do I do that in a way so that I don't fry myself in the process. That was the driver behind it, to speak to my clients' needs around that.
And that is really interesting, because I think what really struck me about it, and that struck me in the proposal as well, was that embodying of change. So you're looking at change at the personal level and also at that kind of global level. And change makers, I think, is a very useful term for that, because it's sort of ambiguous, isn't it? What kind of change are we talking about here?
Yes, so I'm really interested in that inner work of change. So I'm centering women's experience and women's voices in the book. That's another piece where everyone, all genders, all expressions are welcome to read it, but it is centering women's experiences. And we know from all the data around what holds us back, what actually creates barriers and biases in the workplace or in the world as we navigate the world around us. So I'm really curious about how we do that in a work of what is it that I need to overcome in terms of my own thinking, my own feeling, my own stepping up. What does that really look like for me internally? But also that outer work of what am I navigating in the world? Because a lot of this is actually about the system and systems around me. It's actually not that I'm broken and I need to be fixed. It's that I'm navigating a world that wasn't necessarily designed for my thriving. So that inner and outer work, I'm really curious about that work of change as they come together. And then that curiosity I think people can have, which is, this is what I feel angry about, or this is what I feel curious about, or this is what I love to do. How can I do that and not burn out, but also how can I do that and make a difference? So it's where those different pieces meet together.
And it's a fascinating intersection, and there's a sort of feminist element of that, and there's also just sort of the equality, diversity, and inclusion piece of that, and there's the purpose piece. These are big themes.
Yeah.
How did you pull them together into a structure which meant that you could actually write a book to deliver a coherent narrative on them?
Yes. And I guess back to your earlier question on what was the writing process like? I wrestled with that in terms of how do those things interconnect. And then once I could see how they interconnected, the structure kind of fell out of that in terms of what the different chapter headings might be or what those different component parts might be. And I wanted it to read, if you like, from chapter 1 through to chapter 8 in a kind of logical flow. But I also wanted it to read in a sort of dip in and out kind of way, so people could come into the places that they were either was a sort of particular pain point or challenge or were just particularly drawn to. So I'm loving now hearing from readers about, well, what is actually resonating. And I'm also really fascinated by how people read books, because I'm a dip in and out, definitely. I flick through and then I dip in and out. Whereas I'm hearing from lots of readers, no, I start on page 1 and I work all the way through. So I'm glad that when I structured the book, I did think about people might dip in, but also most people probably not like me will want to be really logical in the flow of how that's structured. And so I wanted to design it so it was like a toolkit, a manual, lots of spaces for reflection. There are loads of reflective questions. I feel like I proposed some answers and some ideas, but mostly I'm stirring people's thinking, readers' thinking, and there's space along the way to reflect and record your reflections. So that really builds through the book. And then if you just want to dip into, what do I do with my jealousy? How do I connect with my desires? All the different things that might resonate. What do I do when I'm procrastinating? Might be particular things that jump out. And there's the exercises and what I call power practices against each of those areas people can delve into. So you can take the big picture, but you can also take the component parts. I wanted it to be both. Perhaps that was a bit ambitious, but that was my desire with it.
And it's such a great point generally about thinking not only about you as the writer and what it is you want to say, but about the reader and how they're going to access that.
Yeah.
And the different, not just reading types, but learning types, the reflectors, the activists. You've got your power practices and you've got those provocations. Yes. It's really interesting. I am going to just rewind a second though, because you said, and then you sort of moved on briskly, you said, when I could see how it all fit together. Can you remember how that happened? Did you literally draw it? Was it a kind of in the shower moment? What happened when you went,
yes,
that's how it fits together?
Yeah, I'm really glad you picked up that flippancy there, because I think it's not necessarily a kind of eureka moment, I think, although it can be. So part of it kind of came to me in that I'm doing a walk and then the ideas sort of click. And then for me, I'm really visual. So I have a massive, as a facilitator, I'm always, flip charts and Post-it notes and colored pens and all those things. So I have this decorator's lining paper, which rolls out like a huge flip chart page. And that's where I map ideas and then move them around and block them together. So I was able to literally sort of physically see it and see what those building blocks could be. And then that really helped with, what's going to be in and what's going to be out, what could be some bonuses, what could be some blog posts, if they're not going to be in the book, what else could these things be, that they're still valid and connected, but they're not necessarily going to be in the main document in the main work. So that sort of literal visualization of it all on the ground, literally it was me like on the ground with different bits of stationery for a couple
Not
of days.
metaphoric, people.
Yeah, really, that. And there are reels on my Instagram. I coded all of that. I wanted to show people the behind the scenes. So I sort of done lots and lots of filming and had a little mini post of like, this is what I'm doing today to build. And I had this idea of building the book. I was really building it from the ground up and thinking about the contributors. There are interviews throughout the book with other change makers and their perspectives. So I was thinking about, well, who's going to be where and where do the interviews go? That was all sort of building blocks that I could see visually on the ground. And then that helped me with the writing of it.
Brilliant. And it's funny, we say writing, but actually writing is so many different things, isn't it? And often writing is drawing or going for a walk or, all those things that actually move the thinking forward. Really
yes,
interesting.
I love that. What is it that helps us move the thinking forwards? And sometimes I was remembering the fact that it's really sunny this week when we're recording this, and I was remembering this time last year of sitting outside and actually being away from my desk where I do the rest of my work. And I remembered in preparation for this conversation that I didn't write any of the book sitting here at my desk where I do the rest of my work. I just didn't ever write it here. I always found another physical space in our home or outside of our home. So it was outside a lot when the sun was good. And I live in the Lake District of the northwest of England. So you just take the good days when you have them. And so when the days are not so good, you find other places to write. But I was doing a lot of writing outside, and that space to think, that fresh air, looking out at nature, just those other aspects, I think, helped me to, frankly, to focus, perhaps to be less distracted. If I was at my desk, work stuff also present there, that would perhaps have been more of a distraction. So yeah, those things really helped to have other spaces coded as writing spaces.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. I find it very, very hard to write at my work desk because this is where I answer emails and have calls with people.
You're in all those other modes, aren't you, in that
yes.
geographical position?
And so much is to be done that you should be doing when you're in that space. And yes, I have to just get out, get into a cafe, get into a library, leave the family temporarily. Yeah. And also a big plus one for the roll of paper as well. I use one from IKEA. I hadn't thought about decorator's paper, but that's bigger, actually. I might go and investigate that. But it just, even the biggest flip chart paper ends too soon, doesn't it? This
right.
just, you can just
yes,
keep.
I love the idea that you just connect all of the ideas and have it all in one place. Actually, there was something for me about there's so much that needs to fit into my head, and I felt like I could feel my bandwidth stretching, but also sort of like really hitting the buffers and hitting its capacity. So and I find one document, although it did all have to be in one document, I found that quite unwieldy as it was growing. So again, having it on one enormous piece of paper just helped me to be able to see it literally in one place.
It's like a map of the book, isn't it? You just stand back and and look. Yeah. It's so interesting, that sense of overwhelm and the sense of you spend most of your time when you're writing kind of close in, zoomed into a particular area, thinking about the next word to make the particular point, but then being able to just step back and see the whole thing again. That's a really important discipline, and it also shifts the energy, doesn't it? Which I think is really helpful.
It does. And then I pick up on your word overwhelm, and I remember days where, particularly at the beginning actually, where I didn't think I would hit my word limit. I thought I would struggle. I knew I would do it, but I thought I would perhaps struggle to hit the word limit. So I was really focused on getting words out and getting words down. And then about 2/3 in, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to go over the word limit. And so then the gear completely changed at that point. But just to loop back to that overwhelm piece, early on, I was aware that if I thought, although I had mapped it all out, I could see the big picture. But if I thought too much about that, I would just not start or not do the small minutiae that just needed to get done that day. And I would be just limited really by knowing how big the task was. So that massive learning for me with such a big creative project, which I hadn't ever done before, was how to just take a little piece at a time. So I started to think of it as like, what's the problem that I'm going to solve today? Okay, I'm going to solve the problem in bunny ears of, I'm just going to write a bit of chapter 1 and see how that goes. And then tomorrow I'm going to solve the problem of, I'll just write a little bit of chapter 2. And I just had to kind of give myself really small little bite-sized pieces. And then once the words were all down, and then it was a case of, oh, I actually need to have less words, the problem became different to solve that day. I was like, okay, let me now edit this down or reduce this or cut bits, and giving myself almost like little ways to end up with the big piece done. I feel like that's, for me, that was the only way I could manage the bigness of it, as well as needing to just do the granular work of each word by word.
Yeah, exactly. And I know this is a mantra in the boot camp, isn't it? There's only one way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
Right. And having that structure is helpful because you're sort of feeling, once you've got the structure in place, although I also did end up doing a little bit of rearranging in the edit, it is a case of sort of filling in the gaps, which again helps me see it as smaller little tasks to do rather than this kind of one enormous piece.
And then, so we've talked a lot about the writing, and it's really fascinating just to hear that kind of the emotional and also the practical, tactical stuff that you were doing to manage that. What surprised you about the publishing process? I mean, you sort of said earlier that you handed it over and you thought, right, job done. But no.
Yeah. Well, two pieces I'd like to share. One is that realization again quite early on in the discussions with the publisher, where they essentially commissioned me to write it for them, and that shift of, oh, it's not really now my thing that I'm writing for me, it's their commercial proposition.
Yeah.
And I'm writing it, and I, I'm kind of part of the team to deliver this product. And that, from a kind of business perspective, understanding their business perspective really helped me also to kind of know my role in that. But I do remember that day of that shift of, oh, it's not really just my baby and I can do whatever I like. And I know people take lots of different routes to publishing, but for me, that particular route was, yeah, there's other people involved and they will have a say and they will decide a lot of things. And I just got to that stage of saying, yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm going to let go of some of the decisions and some of the control because I believe in what we're going to create together, and we trust each other to create something that we're all happy with. So that was quite an early realization, which I feel helped me just kind of let go of some of that, perhaps some of the control stuff. And then once it was submitted, I think I said to you before we started recording that I just thought there would be a gap, there'd be a lull, and I frankly would crack on with the rest of my life until it was published. But I realized, oh, there are still quite a few things that I need to be on. And again, my head was in all the detail to get the edit done. And then it's like, I can let go of the detail. But actually, there was still quite a lot of detail needed in terms of proofreading and endorsements and particular pieces with the interviews and all the different facets that you need to build it into that final creation. And I didn't know that was going to come. So that was like, oh, here I am again, back in the detail of chapter 7. Yeah.
And then there's all the ancillary stuff like the cover design and the page design. It's quite fun, isn't it, though?
I enjoyed that, and I'm gonna. You can probably tell what my favorite color is. So I literally was. It was all done virtually. I was like, as long as it's turquoise, I'm happy because I love teal. It's my favorite color. I was like, as long as it's turquoise, I'm good. And I tried not to be too diva-ish about the design piece, but I did enjoy it, and it was fun. It was fun to have those discussions. Yeah,
that's brilliant, and it is a gorgeous color. Now, I always ask my guests, as you know, what's your best tip for a first-time business book author? And I feel a little bit greedy, I'm going to be honest with you, because you've given a huge number of tips now. But, what would be the one single thing that you'd say, if you listen to nothing else today, take this away?
Yeah, because I've talked about structure already. That definitely helped me, and having the deadline, which was imposed through the publishing process. But I know there's no way I would have delivered it unless I had that very, very hard deadline. That definitely helped me. And I think I would just add to that piece I've perhaps already shared around finding a creative space that feels like a place that's conducive for you to write. So whatever the conditions are for you to feel like you can write. So if that's playing music, if I created some playlists for myself, which helped me along the way. And I now share them with my clients. Like, here's the Changemakers playlist.
We need details. What's on the Changemakers playlist?
Oh, so lots of Kate Bush, lots of kind of wailing women actually really helped me in the process of writing. So going back to some of my roots around Bjork and Sinead O'Connor and some of those artists who I kind of grew up with. But
bit of angst.
Something about their kind of soul-based, beautiful voices really helped me at the time. It sounds very indulgent, but that I enjoyed that. And then on the playlist now is more of that kind of more empowering, upbeat dance stuff as well, which I enjoy too. So that music really helps me shift my state. So if I was ever feeling like, oh, it's a bit of a slog, that music would really help me. So I'd say my tip is like what are the conditions that will help you. Snacks really help. Great snacks. Lots of hydration. Music.
That's brilliant. I love the way that the place has progressed from wailing women to something more empowered. That was marvellous. And I always ask people as well, as you know, to recommend a book. So it doesn't have to be a business book, but what book, apart from Changemakers, obviously, do you think that anybody listening should have a read of?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about the equity conversation. I'm really looking forward to Naomi Evans writing with her sister Natalie Evans, and their book is forthcoming. I'm not sure it's published yet, so look out for it. I think it's called The Mixed Race Experience. So for me as a white woman, I'm excited to read that. And Naomi's one of the featured interviews, and I absolutely love the work she's doing with everyday racism. So yeah, excited for that one coming out.
Fantastic. I hadn't heard of that, so I will keep an eye out for it. Sounds brilliant. Do you know when it's coming out? No, you don't. Okay, that's fine. I will do the research and I will tell people in the outro when it's coming out. That's absolutely brilliant. And if people want to find out more about you, Katy, more about Changemakers, where should they go?
My site is katycatalyst.com, Katy Catalyst on Instagram, Katy Murray on LinkedIn, and love to connect with anyone and love to hear what's resonating from the book. It's really fun to hear what's landing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for being so generous and open about the process as well. It's just always fascinating to hear how different people go about it. I have to say, I couldn't listen to music with words as I write. It's one of those things. I could listen to ambient music or classical music or something, but anything with words, I'm lost. I start writing down the lyrics.
Wailing. Maybe it's the wailing that helped, because maybe it was more waily than words. That could have been what was going on there.
Yeah, maybe I need to outsource the wailing. I probably do my own when I'm writing, and that's probably not healthy. Great to talk to you, Katy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much.